Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. So we continue with the book Maqasid Sawm. We wanted to review a little bit the etiquettes of fasting for those who may not have been able to join, and then we'll continue, inshallah. Firstly, fasting in and of itself is not just a matter of the abstention or abstaining or doing without food and drink and physical intimacy from the period of sunrise to sundown or sunset, as we say figuratively. Fasting, what is involved are also some etiquettes which have a lot to do with guiding us in the process of our spiritual development. Of those is the issue of the guarding of the tongue and the body. But one of the things here, it was mentioned last week, but I wanted to really emphasize this again, is the issue of guarding the tongue, especially while one is fasting. That is essential. That is essential. The tongue in and of itself does so much damage when words are not put in their proper place, especially in a time period in which everyone is very sensitive and stressed and under pressure. And so, for instance, we have the guidance of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we see here in the translation of the book Maqasid itself. Whoever does not abandon, vain and decent talk or evil acts, Allah is not in need of his fast. That doesn't mean that the person's fast is invalidated in the sense of that you perform your fast from the time of Fajr to the time of Maghrib. It doesn't mean that is invalidated from that angle, but is diminished tremendously in reward. And then is really up to Allah wa ta'ala whether that fast is accepted or not. But as far as formality is concerned, you meet the criteria for a fast that is considered to be sound. But as far as the spiritual dimension is concerned, it's problematic. We have guidance that's here before us that tells us that Allah is not in need of that fast. Meaning that fast really, it doesn't hold the weight that the fast of a person that abstains from using the tongue in the wrong way, that fast, and the fast of the person that uses the tongue in the wrong way, there's no equivalence between them, simply put. The damage that's done with the tongue, we can see in today's time, especially right now where there's so much misinformation and so on and so forth. That happens in interpersonal relationships as well. We begin to spread misinformation about each other, what we popularly call fake news. And that, it does a lot of damage as far as to people's character or as far as to people's ability to have a sound relationship with others. And so that's one of the first things that Imam Izzuddin Abdul Salam notes, that guarding one's tongue. And of course, the body is something that we know that there's certain acts, that should not be done overall. And so, for instance, that's why the body is mentioned, because the body is the vehicle by which we perform or we undertake actions. But that is essential, the point about the tongue and what kind of speech we engage in. Usually, some people, they end up taking a break from social media. I personally don't advise people to be too distant just because we're in isolation from each other. And I know that people connect through social media with other people and they keep their level of sanity going. But I do advise that people be careful as to, how it is that they spend their time on social media during the time of the fast, because there's a lot of nonsense and there's a lot of beneficial stuff that's on social media. The same thing when it comes to YouTube and other outlets. There's that which is productive and that which is not productive. And remember that this is going to be a Ramadan that's going to be quite unique, and that we are not going to be centered in the masjid, and we're not going to be centered in the tarawih of the masjid, so that our personal development with regard to the fast of Ramadan, most of it is going to depend upon what it is that we put into it as individuals. And maybe even as families, we may not even see that there's a, a co-joined effort, so to speak, or there is a communal effort, because that's depending upon what the situation of the family is in health and work and everything that goes on. And usually what many of us depended upon was the masjid to be that base in which we found that community uh, to support us in the practices of Ramadan. The practices of Ramadan being the salah, being the breaking of the fast, being the taraweeh, the listening to the Quran, the breaks for dhikr, the talks that are reminders, and so on and so forth. And I imagine also that many people are planning to utilize social media during Ramadan as a way to project the environment of Ramadan. And that's why I say that it becomes all the more important for us to utilize social media in the proper way, because it will be the means by which we're connected to each other. There's another issue here, and I mentioned this in other places, and some people may have heard this, is that, be mindful of the fact that we're on social media, and being on social media means that the whole world is watching. And so how we conduct ourselves in Ramadan, our interactions, the whole world will be watching, just like the world is watching to see how it is that the Muslims are dealing with this pandemic that we're experiencing now. I've heard a number of comments with regard to this issue, people monitoring the religious behavior of others. And so, for instance, there's, an opportunity to be a model of what Islam is. And so our speech should be encouraging, our speech, if we're feeling irritated, or if someone is irritating us, we should remind ourselves that, we're fasting, fasting, that we should leave, those things which trigger us to the point where we're exemplifying behavior or speech that's problematic. And that's what the issue comes in, the other point of stating that one is fasting, right? And this comes not only in the issue if someone invites you to eat while you're fasting, then you say, I'm fasting, but this also comes to the point of, when someone is irritating you and taking you out of the modality that you want to be in. What is the mode that you want to be in? You want to be in a mode in which your mind is clear, in which your stomach is in control, and you're simplifying back down to something that's very fundamental and basic, which is the remembrance of Allah wa ta'ala. This fast is going to be extremely unique in this way, that our movement is going to be controlled and our interaction with people is controlled. And so we're going to have a certain amount of time on our hands that, we're going to have to train ourselves, especially if we suffer from anxiety or uneasiness, or we, have ADHD, or we find ourselves in a position where we're stressed. We're going to have a lot of time on our hands, which is just going to make us focus on that state or those states that we may be experiencing or suffering. And so that, leads us to a point that we should remind ourselves that we're fasting, and we should also show, thankfulness, not just to, here the example is the issue of being thankful to a person that is inviting us to eat, but overall the spirit, as was mentioned in the last session, is to be thankful to Allah wa ta'ala also for the opportunity, right? To be thankful to Allah wa ta'ala for the opportunity to receive forgiveness, to increase in good deeds, and to find ourselves in the situation where we can take a break from the influence of shaitan. One dua that is used here when breaking the fast is ذهب الذم وابتلعت العروق, right? And that is the dua that some of the ulama recommend, that that our thirst is gone, and that the veins are moistened. وثبت الأجر inshallah, and that inshallah that the reward for the act of abstaining is established. There's another dua as well. That one that was just mentioned is not popular amongst some people. But the one that's mentioned with frequency, and these dua are made when the fast is broken. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that point. when the fast is broken, these dua or addi'a are made. Allahumma laka Allahumma laka sumtu wa rizqika aftartu. I apologize because the translation here doesn't contain the Arabic, and sometimes it's a little difficult to read the transliteration. But we're asking Allah wa ta'ala to reward us for the fast. And we're saying that that fast that we performed is for Allah wa ta'ala, laka samtu, right? That we're saying, oh Allah, it's for you that I fasted. And that, there's an issue that comes into play there. The issue of integrity and honesty with ourselves. Are we fasting for Allah wa ta'ala in that sense of seeking the face of Allah, seeking Jannah and forgiveness? Or are we fasting because this is the custom of religious practice of the Muslims? Or are we fasting for weight loss? This is one of those issues where the intention becomes presented to ourselves, or we bring it back to ourselves. When what? When we break the fast, we revisit our intention. Why is it that we're fasting? Why is it that we're doing this? In the past, there used to be some of the elders in the Muslim community in different places. When they used to give guidance, they used to say, remember your intention in the beginning of the action, in the middle of the action, and the end of the action. Because at any point in the action, the intention can change. And so here is one of those situations in which we're being trained to monitor our action. Except this dua is what brings that to mind, right? This dua is what brings that to mind. The first dua is a dua in which we're being thankful to Allah wa ta'ala for the rizq, right? That we're being given. But here, we're reminded of why it is that we fast, for who it is that we fast, and what the intention behind the fast is. Right. And then after we remember that, then we acknowledge the fact that Allah wa ta'ala is the one that gives the rizq, the one that gives us our provision. And with that provision, we break fast. And so, for instance, that provision consists of the ability to earn, the ability to have, and that which we have, right? The ability to earn, the ability to have, and that which we have, that thing that we have. Some people, they earn, but they don't have. You know what I'm saying? They whatever it is that they have, they're impoverished, and they have to, get rid of it, so to speak. They have to dispose of it by giving it to others in bills, or, for instance, they may not even have for themselves because they're providing for others. And so the ability to have the rizq, right, is something that is very important to take advantage of in our remembrance, that we should acknowledge the fact that Allah wa ta'ala provides us with rizq, and we have the ability to really, take advantage of that rizq, and we have the rizq before us, right? We have the rizq before us. This is going to be a time period where some of us will struggle. So that's something to keep in mind, that here, in this dua, Allahumma laka samtu ala rizqika aftartu, that here we're remembering the intention, and we're remembering why it is that we fast, and then we're acknowledging, the rizq of Allah. And so that should be done in the spirit of shukr. Shukr meaning the spirit of thankfulness and humility before Allah wa ta'ala, right? And so we get the reward for being thankful, right? And we also get the reward for remembering Allah wa ta'ala, and we get the reward for the fast. There's another hadith in which we are talking about the fact that Allah wa ta'ala is the one that helped us to fast. Oh Allah, you helped me, so I fasted, and provided me, so I broke the fast. So I broke the fast. This is the only translation that I know of the Maqasid that is without the Arabic, without the Arabic. So there's some difficulty. It actually was a project that was being worked on, and it was not completed. I think there's another translation that's floating around of the book Maqasid, but I haven't seen it in a while. So here, we acknowledge the fact that without Allah wa ta'ala, we're not able to fast. We're not able to fast. Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi alayhi, he talked about the fact that, that is from the ni'mah of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, the action that we perform and the ability to perform the action, right? And so here we're acknowledging that Allah tabarak wa ta'ala is, this is what you call tawfiq, that Allah tabarak wa ta'ala is simplifying for us the ability to undertake acts of ibadah and goodness. So we acknowledge that Allah tabarak wa ta'ala has helped us, and we acknowledge the provision, and we acknowledge also that we're breaking the fast under the command of Allah, although it doesn't say that here. We're commanded to break the fast. And that'll come up in the section which talks about the continuous fast is not something which is practiced in the deen, which is a fast without any break. Is a fast without any break. In general, that's not practiced in the deen. The fast of Ramadan, that's not the form of it. The fast of Ramadan is from the time when the sun rises after Fajr, at the end of Fajr, all the way to the time of what? All the way to the time of Maghrib. Well, of course, we stop before, the time of Fajr itself, but it's that within that period, of the sunrise, sunset, we say that. So in that technicality, we have to remember that we should break the fast. That we should begin the fast or initiate the fast before Fajr itself. But usually, we have the habit of saying it's from sunrise to sunset, right? But the fast in itself, when is it that we begin the fast? We begin, before Fajr. We begin before Fajr. So when Fajr is initiated, we should not be eating. We should not be eating. I needed to clarify that point because of the habit that we have of saying from sunrise to sunset. And some people begin to think that you can eat after Fajr, and I don't want to bring that confusion into the fore. So those are from the etiquettes of the fast, to take to the dua that is in the sunnah and to utilize it when we break the fast, not to immediately just break the fast, but we should acknowledge that. This dua too, we find from the muhaddithun, these dua that, like for instance, this one that says, "Oh Allah, you helped me, so I fasted and provided for me, so I broke the fast." It should be after you break the fast. It should be after, and that's the mawda' dua, or the place of the dua is after you break the fast, so that it falls in line. So I broke fast. I broke fast. The fourth is, from the etiquettes or the adab or the behavior that we should undertake in the fast is, that we should be people that follow the sunnah. So what do we break the fast with? And here we find that, that the Prophet ﷺ would break the fast with dates and water. It was related as such. He used to break the fast before praying, right, before the salah, with 3 ripe dates. If there were no ripe dates, then regular dry dates. And then where there was no dates, then just water alone. The issue, there's a custom amongst the Muslims to break the fast with milk and dates and so on and so forth. But this is the sunnah here. This is the sunnah that, water and dates is the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the custom of the Muslims has been to break it with milk and dates, which is a drink. There's no issue with that. You can break the fast with other things, but it's recommended from the sunnah to break the fast with dates. We know that dates are costly for some people. It becomes expensive. So with anything, it's allowed to break the fast, but the sunnah is to break the fast with dates using an odd number, and in this case is mentioned 3. Of the etiquettes of the fast is this point of breaking the fast and hasting to break the fast, meaning not to delay the breaking of the fast, but to delay when it is that you eat the suhoor. Right? I wanted to talk about the breaking of the fast first, just because it came in that order. Breaking the fast is not from the sunnah to say that I'm just going to break the fast because it's time to break the fast without the issue of thubut, right? Without the issue of establishing that it is the appropriate time. And even to be honest with you, looking at the calendar is not sufficient. Sometimes the calendars are off. Just like when we use the compass on our telephones to find the qibla, sometimes the compass is off. It's the same thing when it comes to the calendars. So you have to become accustomed of looking into the natural environment and see. But if you can't, become accustomed to that, you use the tools like time and date, and then you give yourself, a couple minutes just to ensure that it's the time to break the fast. So hastening breaking the fast doesn't mean that you should not be conscious of when it is that the fast is to be broken, because our programs that we have on our telephones and computers may not always be accurate, or there may be issues that come up with the time. And so part of the fast is to fast in the appropriate time. Part of the fast is to fast in the appropriate time and to break the fast when the time is mandated. Or else it causes an issue where a fast may have to be, it may have to be made up. It may have to be made up, especially once the knowledge is there. If a person were to eat without consciousness, that in itself, if it's you're eating without consciousness and then you remember that you're fasting or you eat by accident, there's no issue in that for the most part. For the most part, there's no issue in that. Some of the ulama, they say out of precaution to make that day up, but there's some evidence that dictates that nisyan, forgetfulness, right, is, forgetfulness is something which is, is excused, but that should not be abused. It should not be abused, and we should, guide our youth to not abuse that as well. Not to eat something to say, oh, I forgot that I was fasting. That type of approach. So there should be, علينا يعني نحترم حرمة الصوم, that that we should respect the sanctity of the fast, right? The sanctity of the fast. So that's what the issue of breaking the fast, that we should know, the time in which Maqrib comes in, and we should become people that are experienced with that. And I know that it's difficult in this quarantine to, always look into the horizon to see, or there may be some obstacles, but we should become aware of that. We should become aware of the natural environment. That puts us in tune with the time of Fajr and the time of Isha. I know people, in Puerto Rico, that they get up and they're not even Muslim, and they get up and they know exactly when the sun is coming and when the sun is going down. They measure it out from the horizon with their fingers and everything. And all the more that should be the practice of the Muslim. That should be the practice of the Muslim. So if you can have non-Muslims that they accurately are invested in that process of seeing when it is that the sun is rising and when the sun is setting, and they have an understanding of, the midday and so on and so forth, because they're so in tune to the natural environment, all the more the Muslim. The Muslim should not depend fully, on technological devices that need to be tuned, or that they can be erroneous, to be able to understand when it is to pray and, when it is to fast and so on and so forth. They are pieces of technology that assist us, but we shouldn't depend upon them to the point that if they were absent, we would not know how to function, right? And so that's why in the training of the ulama in the past, they used to teach them how to find the qibla, and they used to teach them how to tell the salah from the shadow. They used to be able to find the qibla by being able to understand the geography of things. And so with that geography or geographical understanding, you will be able to determine the qibla. And this is something, also that, can be done in Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, or even in the Masajid community. It's a good exercise for parents with their children, to bring people into tune with the natural environment. And so the breaking of the fast, we should determine when the appropriate time is. The issue of delaying the suhoor, you can eat the suhoor at any time. After the salah is, after the fast is finished in Maghrib, you can eat the suhoor, but that's not going to help you to strengthen you to fast. What is going to strengthen you to fast is to eat the suhoor as close as possible to the time of Fajr, right? And so you have to distinguish between the time of Fajr and before Fajr, when you're going to, stop the suhoor. You shouldn't allow you eating the suhoor to take you into Fajr and then be negligent in that regard. Some people do that. Some people, they'll eat until the time that they hear the adhan on their phone, and Fajr it already came in. You should, leave a gap, some small gap, just to be able to define the time. And that's part of the training of our youth into proper practice, right? Into proper practice. It doesn't necessarily have to be the number of 2 rak'at or the number of a certain ayat, a certain amount of ayat are recited, but it should be enough of a gap that you're able to distinguish between the time of Fajr coming in and when you broke the fast. And that's up to the people. We don't have to make that issue difficult on the people, but it's the sunnah to take to the suhoor because it gives you strength in the fast. It gives you strength in the fast. And that suhoor, should be before the time of Fajr. If you were to eat it at the time of Isha and go to sleep or whatever, okay, fine, that's the suhoor, as far as helping you to have something in your stomachs and that's it, but that's not the suhoor of the sunnah. That's just having something in your system so that you're able to function. But the suhoor of the sunnah, it gives strength. And so there's some issues that come along with this. And that's the issue also of the fast being one in which we train ourselves. We have about 9 to 10 days in which we train ourselves to stay up after Fajr, And so in this time period, there's not going to be a lot of this issue of having to go to the masjid. And so we don't have time, and then when we come back, everybody is tired and so on and so forth. You're going to have the ability to control your schedule, right? You're going to have the ability to control your schedule. So the issue comes up of how is it that you're going to combine your sleep and your salah and your reading of the Quran or whatever, and then also be in the situation in which you can maintain the fast. Although the fast is not invalidated if you fast throughout the day, some of the ulama in the Maliki madhab, they had big disdain for the person that fasts the majority of the day while sleeping, so that the only thing that you do is you wake up close to the time where you break the fast, you pray, and that's it. But you slept all day while you were supposed to be fasting. That takes away from your ability to gain from the fast, right? That takes away from your ability to gain from the fast spiritually and in reward. It diminishes it, right? So here, the Prophet ﷺ is noted as having conveyed to eat the suhoor because in the suhoor there's barakah. He also said the people will be well so long as they hasten to break the fast. That means to break the fast, when the fast is due to be broken. It doesn't mean to just break the fast without any consciousness of when the time is in. Right? He also said in the Hadith Qudsi that Allah said, the most beloved servant of mine is the one who hastens to break the fast. Right? And so here there's an encouragement, to be on guard and to break the fast. And that shows that there's balance in Islam. That we fast, we break the fast. And there's balance. And there's more discipline in that than the whole issue of doing without in general, right? And so if you want to take a lesson in discipline, a big lesson in discipline is trying to maintain staying awake after Fajr and fasting from the time where Fajr is into the time of Maghrib straight through. You may have to take a little bit of a fast during a little after Dhuhr, which is the Sunnah, but trying to maintain that regimen is one which we should aim at. Because I know a lot of people, they figure out ways to take breaks from their job or whatever it may be, and they fast throughout the day and they sleep while they're fasting. And so that really, it takes away, it diminishes from the spirit of the fast. But if someone were to do that for one reason or another, mental health issues or issues of, of being physically tired or whatever, inshallah, the fast is accepted by Allah wa ta'ala, and the ulama said that it's still a sound fast. Some of them, like I mentioned, like the Malikis, they had issues with that. The breaking of the fast, or the hastening to break the fast, is encouraged because it's one of the signs of the way that we fast as Muslims. We put everything in its proper place, and that's what is entitled as wisdom. We put things in their proper place. And so the acts of ibadah or acts of worship in Islam, they come with a wisdom to them where we put things in their proper place. And so here, the issue comes to the fore is that the people of the book, remember when we recited the ayah, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So here, the ayah is saying that the fast was legislated upon you as it was legislated upon the people that came before you, so that perhaps you may attain to or gain taqwa. And so here, the hadith is teaching us part of the story behind the ayah. And we mentioned part of that story that the people of the book in the past, they changed the fast. And then they weren't able to maintain it. And so here, the hadith tells us that the deen will remain manifest, right? It will remain in its proper manifestation so long as the believers hasten to break the fast. For verily, the people of the book, in this case, the Jews and the Christians, delayed the fast. And that caused them to not be able to keep up with it. And so the fast in and of itself has its own pressures and its own stresses. So its proper practice should be maintained so that the proper balance can be maintained. And so all of the points that have been mentioned with regard to the etiquettes are part of keeping the proper balance, like the issue of suhoor, like the issue of, of making the intention, the issue of, taking the suhoor before Fajr, like the issue of ensuring that Maghrib is in and then making way to break the fast. All of those things are important to keep the balance of the fast. And then throughout the day, you busy yourself with the dhikr of Allah and acts of ibadah which nourish you spiritually. So that was the practice of the companions themselves, to rush the breaking of the fast and to delay the suhoor. Delaying the suhoor means that they ate the suhoor or they ate thing, I believe in Urdu is sihri, that they ate that to be able to maintain the fast. Verily delaying the suhoor, the morning meal, translated here, is to strengthen the person's fast. It aids the believer in keeping engaged in ibadah. If not, by the time Maghrib and Isha come, you'll be so worn out, with the stresses that people have in their daily lives, that it is difficult to be able to maintain. Right? Between the sword of the Messenger and Fajr was the length of the recitation of 50 ayat. So Imam Izzuddin Abdul Salam goes with that opinion. So you look at 50 ayat, and then you see you know what amount of time it is that it takes to recite that in. And so that varies from person to person. So rush the iftar. They rush the iftar in order not to incur any harm. So the individual should follow the teaching of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, should break the fast as soon as the time enters. Right. But as far as the Fajr, you should leave some gap between yourself and when you take between Fajr and when you yourself take to the store. And the ulama, they say that, okay, fine, if you were to eat all the way up to the time of the adhan and the time is actually coming in at the time, there's no harm. There's no harm in that, but it's preferable to leave some gap. But if you were to rush and you were to wake up and you only have a little bit of time and you want to grab the suhoor and you only have a little bit of time before Fajr comes in, you don't necessarily have to fall back on that rule of leaving a gap between the time of Fajr and the time of the suhoor. You can eat all the way up to the time of the adhan. There's no issue with that. When you look at the madhab across the board, we get that insight. We get that insight. And so we want to, end on this note, and we'll come back with the things that should be avoided during the fast. We mentioned the whole issue of the continuous fast. If there's any questions, I'll try to take them right now. If not, we'll come to an end. Okay. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين والعصر إن الإنسان في خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. We'll end on that note. I want to encourage people that if they have any fast to make up, you can still make up your fast all the way up to the time of Ramadan. Right before Ramadan, you should leave a day gap. Some people say that after the 15th of Sha'ban, you shouldn't have any fasts. But that in reality is one opinion. But when it comes to making up obligatory fasts, you can make them up at any time. The most important thing is to make sure that you have one day between Sha'ban and Ramadan. And that's what we call Yawm al-Shak, to ensure that Ramadan is not in, right? To ensure that there's a difference between Sha'ban and Ramadan. But for those who have fasts to make up, you still have about 9 days to be able to do that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.